Retro.
Yeah.
Electro. Tech.
Oh yeah.
Hey, turn the lights back on. Wow. Retro Electro Tech. When real audio ruled the world.
Well, hello there yet again, all you knuckle-dragging old bruisers and vivacious vixens of vintage audio persuasion. Say that fast 5 times while hanging by your tongue. No takers? Okay. This is Retro Ernest of Retro Electro Tech, and apparently I didn't wake up dead today. Good thing, since I have to take a drive in just a bit and don't need to be ticketed for driving while deceased. How would I explain that one in court? Excuse me, Your Honor. Pardon the stench and the rotting flesh, but hey, I have to drive. What can I say? But anyways, things are looking up. And on that note, we have here another video concerning this Realistic STA7 or STA7, that's Sam Tango Alpha, custom manufactured in Korea for the Shack. No, not the Love Shack, babies. I'm talking Radio Shack. And on that note, this unit brings to the table around, 10 watts per channel into 8 ohms, just enough to pleasantly tickle all 206 of your rattly old bones. So why did this little receiver decide to show up to the party? Well, we're going to get into that. Okay, so back to my normal sprechen Sie voice. This is a working unit. I know that because the customer uses it, and we have it powered up here, as you can see, by the lit dial. So what am I going to do to this? Well, he wants me to go through. I've been doing some work for him, getting some of his other equipment straightened up. So I'm going to go through this and just give it a once over. See that everything looks okay on the inside. I just barely popped the top off it before I started this video, so I haven't really looked in there and inspected things, but I'm going to do that and do a couple passes and just check it out, make sure there's nothing that needs to be addressed. Of course, I'll probably end up servicing the controls because there's quite a bit of dust and debris and garbage that I'm going to clean out of there, so I'll end up removing the face and all that stuff and seeing if I can gain good access to those controls without a big ordeal, and go from there. Now, I don't think he wants to put too much into this unit, but nonetheless, I'm going to give him some basic service and address what needs to be addressed, like I said. And once again, it's a working unit, so there's that. So let me go ahead and get the camera repositioned so we can all take a closer look and see what there is to see. Alright, here's a wide view of the top side, and I have this on some padded blocks just face down right now. It's a little bit easier for me to work in this position while I'm sitting down, at least, so I don't have to hunch over and all that. Anyways, we're looking at primarily in this area the tuner section. There's some inputs feeding the board as well. This is our main power supply section here, amplifier section, so that's about the gist of that. So I'm going to start by doing a cursory look over, get the magnified light in here and just take my time looking at things so that I can try to be as thorough with this first pass as possible, because I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time in this unit overall. Anyways, let's see here. Here's a point that I bring up once in a while that may prove useful to some of you. I brought it up before, but I'll bring it up again, and that's when I'm going through doing an inspection, it makes it a little bit easier, at least for my brain, to sort of use my imagination and imagine that there's a vertical line and horizontal line dividing these larger areas of circuit boards into quadrants, okay? And it worked for me because it kind of helps me to focus my eye and my attention on a particular area and not allow myself to get distracted by the bigger picture. So depending on the size of a surface area and component population and all that will sometimes dictate how you want to divvy that up. Structure and being systematic, that's a good thing in this situation. So okay, this ought to be really exciting here, but I'm going to take these little imaginary quadrants that I talked about and take a gander at these little parts and pieces and look for anything that's discolored, heat stressed, semiconductors that are cracked, fractured, like transistors, diodes, that sort of thing, cap cans that are bulging or physically leaking. So yeah, everything seems to look pretty good thus far. There's a light layer of what looks like, it almost looks like sawdust. So let me see, move on over to here. Okay, let me give all this kind of a once over here. Don't worry, this will be over with soon. Okay. Tuning condenser is pretty dirty. Got to get that cleaned out. I'm going to get this whole thing cleaned out, but yeah, I want to get that cleaned out for sure. Okay. All right. So I'm going to angle the camera a little bit different, and we'll take a look at the power supply because there's a few things that I want to point out to the customer and you guys as well. So let's do that. So if you notice a few of these E caps here in the main area of the power supply, the labels are doing the shrinky dink thing, so these are getting hot. So we got caps getting hot in here. And what we probably should go ahead and do is recap this power supply because the power supply is showing signs of heat stress. So I should recap the power supply area and go through and really component check the area as well, make sure things haven't drifted, and in turn, when things drift like resistors and all that, that could result in problems with regulating voltage and current and all that if they drift way out of tolerance and so forth. Kind of like the dog chasing its tail. Things heat up, parts drift, they introduce other problems, especially if they drift far enough out of spec where, yeah, they cause problems. So I'm going to real quick get with the customer, and then I'll be right back because I want to see if he wants me to go ahead and redo the power supply. So I got to go ahead on recapping this area in here. Some of these E caps that I'm going to pull, there's like 14 caps in total in this power supply area and part of the amplifier section here. I'm going to recap everything in there. Like I said, there's about 14 caps, and I will cover some of that process. I want to point out a few things that might prove helpful to some of you that are working on one of these units here, and that's how I decided to gain access to the controls. Okay, and there's a few different ways I could have done it. I took the easier approach. So one way to go about gaining access to things is the removal of this metal panel, this chassis panel, front chassis panel. But I don't really see a reason why a person would want to do that unless it's absolutely necessary. But to gain access to the controls, not so much. Let me pan up here. The lamp housing here, you can see I just have it lifted out of the way, just hanging here so it doesn't flop back down. But this metal lamp housing is in the way of accessing the controls. Okay, or at least accessing them good. Yeah, if I really wanted to play Twister and all that and get in there, and I probably could, but it's tight. Okay, so now I have all this access to the controls. Here, over here, and then all the switches, a little switch cluster over here. The way that I chose to gain access was just removing the faceplate, and there were a few other little things I had to do, a little song and dance. And then I was able to access this lamp housing from the inside because there's a couple screws that you access from the inside of the housing. You could see that I have the access I need here, and ultimately that was for the purpose of removing the lamp housing here. All right. So because I've been doing these videos in a few sections, sometimes I forget where I left off or if I mentioned something before, because I've got a lot going on, but bear with me here. So what I'm going to say, and hopefully I didn't repeat it, was the way that I did that was fairly straightforward, and ultimately after getting the I think I may have mentioned a thing or two about this plastic panel, but removing the face plate here was pretty straightforward. 4 screws, okay, and I think I pointed them out, but I'll do it again. One here, one over here, and I put them back in because, again, I don't want to lose them. A couple on the bottom side, and then toward the center here, there's that standoff that extends from this bracket. You can see the standoff, and it drops down through the hole here in this lamp housing, and stops at the bottom here. The standoff, it kind of ends right here, kind of secures to the bottom of the lamp housing here, and the threaded portion drops down into a bracket down in here. Okay, so 4 screws, one on each side on the bottom, the center standoff that extends from the bracket, and then there's only one more screw, and let me zoom in just slightly, and it's kind of in an odd place why they chose to do that. I don't know exactly. Well, there might have been 2 actually originally. Yeah, originally there was 2, but and you could see these threaded posts here. This threaded post here meets up with this hole, and then there's a screw on the inside, so it passes through from the inside into this threaded post, and there was one over here. Let's see if I can. Yeah, actually the post is still here. It broke off the plastic, so yeah, it's still there. So you can see where it broke off right here. So maybe I'll glue that in, of course. Whatever. It was like that when I got into it, but yeah, I'll epoxy it in so that this screw can be used over here. So there's one over here as well as the point, which, I don't know, I think that was a little bit overkill, but that's okay. I mean, whatever. It works. That's the point. But don't forget about the screws on the inside, because when I took the 4 screws off, plus the standoff that passes through the lamp housing, of which has that bracket that's attached to the plastic faceplate. When I got all that out, I was kind of pulling on it. I never pull real hard until, I'm sure I could. But I was wondering, well, why isn't this faceplate coming off? So I took a gander there on the inside and saw that there was the one screw intact. And once I removed that, the whole plate came off, of course. So again, so once you remove that face, then you have the let me show you real quick. You have this dial strip that I'm going to drop it down in here real quick. These explanations take a long time, but actually doing it is quick. So anyways, back to this. The dial strip here, once you get the cover off here, the faceplate, there's a couple of, let me zoom in once again. Let me get some light in here. That might be a little bit better. I don't know. But over here, there's a couple of holes, and on this side, there's a couple of holes. But these holes on this end, you'll notice when I lift this out, they're just they're slotted. Okay, so you can slide this out this way. All right, I didn't know that at the time. I thought they were just regular holes, so I pulled the fasteners out completely. You don't have to. Let me get this back in. All right. So obviously you don't have to pull the fasteners out completely. You just have to kind of back them off a little bit. And what I mean by that is they use these plastic. I'm sure you're familiar with these. It's for lack of a better term, a little anchor that drops in the hole first, even before the plate. these anchors, and then once the plate is in place, you push these plastic fasteners in. You know, you've seen them before. They're around. They're pretty common. Well, this obviously utilizes those. So, but on the other side here, you have the other. You have the other two. These ones do have to be pulled out completely, of course, because you know they're just regular, you know, holes drilled into the strip there. Get this back in here. Come on, so I can get it out of the way. So once you pull those out, then you know you'll have to score along the top here. You can do that before or after, either or, whatever. You just have to get those fasteners out of there one way or the other. But before or after, you want to get a razor, X-Acto knife, whatever. I just use a razor because I have them around, you know, these refills for my box cutter. But they're stout razors. They're not all flimsy because you don't want to use something flimsy in there. And then you just want to score along this, obviously along the top here, between the plate and the rail here. Just gently score along there all across the length so that you can cut loose that double-sided tape. Let me back out a little bit. Cut loose the double-sided tape, and then once you have that all free, obviously, you know, you can, you know, grab hold of this and, you know, pull it out. And then once you get that dial strip out of the way, then of course you have access to the inside so that you can, and I don't know, again, if I pointed this out earlier or not. I don't think I did, but whatever. So you have these tabs here. You see these tabs that are bent inwards with the screw holes, and one over here. You got, you know, one over here. So again, once you have this dial strip out of the way, you got access to the screws that ultimately screw into the lamp housing here. So again, the explanation showing the detail was a little bit lengthier, but it happens fast. It's easy to do. And that's a good way to get, again, that lamp housing out of the way so you can access the controls. And in my case, I'm going to do a multi-flush cleaning, and then, you know, once I get it all flushed out, get these controls sparkly clean, then I'm going to follow up with a little bit of fader lube and all that stuff, and get everything working smoothly, keep everything working smoothly. Okay, so before I swing around back, I just wanted to point out when I was getting these wires out of the way and, you know, removing the original wire ties, so I could clear a little bit of a path in here where I'm going to be working and recapping. I discovered a couple wires here, and one broke loose, but you might be able to see that they were just soldered together. I don't know if somebody was extending some wiring here. They look to be the same wires. So yeah, I don't know what the purpose was. I'm thinking maybe the wires got damaged. Somebody was doing some work in here, they clipped them, whatever, and then, or they just had to clip them for whatever reason and just joined them back together, you know, soldered them together, and yeah. But the thing is, though, they didn't apply any heat shrink tubing, insulation, whatever. They just left them bare, and I discovered that when I was moving the harnesses around. And these wires go from this potentiometer here, you know, to these switches. So I mean, not a big deal. I'll resolder this one, put some heat. Well, I'm gonna have to you know, break this apart anyways, because I'm gonna have to slip on some heat shrink tubing and all that, and just do it right, in other words. And there you go. So let me swing around back now. So anyways, there's a couple access panels, you know, big panel over this area, a little access panel here. I'm going to be working mostly on the bottom here, desoldering the caps. This is, you know, that power supply area. And I'm going to be touching up some solder joints all over this unit. As I started looking at things a little bit more, I saw some solder joints that were just substandard. I might point them out if I have time when I get into that, but for the most part everything looks all right, but there's just some stuff that's a little bit sloppy. So obviously there's somebody working in here at some point, and you know, again, when I see solder joints that are substandard, I just take care of them. So a little bit more to do than I expected, but you know, that's usually how it is once you start getting into stuff and looking around and all that. So anyways, I'm going to start desoldering some caps and get some new ones on board and try to get this thing wrapped up ASAP. Let's see if that loosened it up. Yeah, looks good. Let me straighten out these pins a little bit. You got to be careful though. You got to make sure that they desoldered okay. That's why I was wiggling around the cap to see if I saw the pins wiggling around okay, because you don't want to start bending these leads if they didn't desolder from the pad properly. So that's why I just give them a little bit of a wiggle and see if everything looks clear, and they do. Now let me get the desoldering iron out of the way here. And back around here, I'm going to start by removing this cap here. I want to make note of polarity because there are times that it's either not marked on the board, or if it is marked on the board, it may not be marked correctly. So let me get this out of here. Okay. And it is marked. Alright, so here's the plus symbol here, positive symbol, and I confirm that when I pull out a cap, I make sure that I make note of that if there is some kind of an indicator on the board. And you do need to make note of that because sometimes these indicators are printed on the board incorrectly, or they're not present at all. But in this case, yeah, everything was jiving okay. So you might, you know, some of you, depending on how you decide to work, especially if you're going to pull out multiple caps at one time, you know, there's people that do that. And if you're working against a board layout from the service manual that lays everything out where everything goes on a particular board, then great. But you might also need to just diagram that and, you know, mark where all the caps go, their values and all that jazz, and their polarity and all that. You'll save yourself a big hassle in the end. But a lot of times I'll do one cap at a time. I'll pull one out, shove the new one in and move my way along. But I still need to make note of polarity because I'm not going to rely 100% on any board markings or what's printed on the board, if there is even anything printed on the board. Now, if there isn't anything printed on the board and you want to mark the you know, positive symbol or whatever on, you know, on the footprint, that's fine and everything, but I recommend not using anything permanent. You're going to want to use like a fine tip marker, maybe something that's not permanent. That's your decision. Now, someone like myself who's expected to work at a professional level, when everything's said and done, I really don't want a marker you know, visible all over the board, you know, dotted all over the board. Even though it serves a valid purpose, if another professional later on goes in and, you know, knows that I was in there last, maybe the owner says, well, you know, I had it worked on by Retro Electrotech, and, you know, he did some recapping in the power supply, and another professional goes in there and sees that I have, you know, the landscape all dotted with symbols and marker. You know, it's not really a horrifying thing, but I want to leave everything very clean. But again, that's your choice. If you're a hobbyist and it's your piece of equipment, you may decide, oh, I'm not, you know, that's not a big deal to me. But if you're striving to work at a professional level and you're trying to advance well, then I'd recommend that you use something that's not permanent, that you can get like a swab and some alcohol, clean it off after, you know, you have the cap installed. Because also too, don't assume that, well, you know, if I put my marking inside the footprint here, once I put the cap in there, the cap's going to cover it. Well, you notice there's a bit of a size difference between, you know, the original and the replacement, okay? So it may not, in fact, cover it up. So whatever, there's that. So just, it depends on what level of work you want to do. So if I'm going to mark something, I'm going to, you know, I might use like, you know, a pencil and just put a little symbol there, and I know that I could wipe it off after that or whatever the case. So just some pointers I'm throwing out for those getting into doing this work, some recapping and all that. Depending on how neat you want to leave things and how much of a professional level job you're striving to do, just a few pointers. But if anything, as far as the takeaway, make note of polarity as you're removing caps and reinstalling them, and don't rely 100% on the markings that are provided by the manufacturer, or, you know, again, there may not be anything at all, so just take away that at least. Here's the new filters here, just dangling about. I'll get everything nice and straight and soldered in just a bit. I'm going to go ahead and remove the rest of these caps off camera, because there's no point in just over and over again doing the same thing. You get the point. And when I get everything on board, then I'll come back when I'm soldering things back in. I'm not going to go through all the soldering on camera, but I'll do a little bit of it. And that's it. And then I'll show the end result of everything all cleaned up. I might go through a little bit of control servicing, just a little bit. Not very much, because I cover that in detail all the time, like I just said. But yeah, go from there. And then once I get everything done, you know, the final testing. So I'll be back in just a moment. All right, so everything I said I was going to recap is recapped. And here's the you know, bag of old caps here. Yeah, give those to the customer if he wants them. And other than that, everything went fairly well. There was a few caps around the edge, you know, on the underside there, because of the chassis, that were a little harder to negotiate. And there was a couple of caps under here where I'm pointing that I replaced with film caps that were difficult both to take out and even a bit harder to reinstall, because there, you know, was a strip of metal under there that was very very problematic. One of the film caps in particular that was you know, kind of housed deeper underneath the strip of metal, part of the chassis. It was a real bear, especially to get the soldering iron under there without the soldering iron making contact with the metal chassis, and in turn the metal chassis sucking up the heat of the soldering iron, making it a real pain in the butt to work on. So I'm probably not going to have time to flip this thing around. I'm at the point where I'm starting to service controls. I have the whole unit kind of sloped. You know, it's kind of propped up from the back. It's sitting on these padded blocks. I have rags under here, so I have it positioned for drainage, in other words, and that's exactly what I'm getting ready to do. But, you know, other than the issue that I had on the backside with those film caps, trying to access them and all that, everything else went okay. The only thing I'm going to do on the backside, like I mentioned earlier, is just touch up some solder joints. So there's that. And I know that I didn't show the filming of soldering the caps in. I'm sorry about that, but I had to move really quick. Plus I had some people coming into the shop a couple times and all that, so I had to stop and talk, so I lost a little bit of time there. So I just want to get on this. So the only thing I'm going to do here is just pretty much what I already mentioned, that I got everything recapped. You can see everything here. Everything's looking good. And I got the boards cleaned up a bit. The only thing I'm going to do now is service the switches. I'm not going to get into the details of that, because I always do, and I will again in the not so distant future. But yeah, other than what you see me doing now, just, you know, I have some access holes here, so that's good. And, you know, just a lot of this kind of stuff, what you see me doing, just, you know, working the buttons over and over and over again in an effort to scrub the internal contacts, work them thoroughly. And I'll do that over and over again, let things drain out, and then, you know, I'll hit them again a second time, a third time, just work them and work them. Same thing with the potentiometers over here. You know, I have my hooked applicator so I can get under the underside of the pots where the access ports are on all but, well, actually two of them. Two of the pots here have their ports facing up, two of them don't. So you get my point. So I'll just be doing that, multi-flush cleaning them, working the shafts over and over again, exercising them, and there you go. Otherwise, I cleaned up the harnesses. I put some heat shrink tubing on those sections of bare wire that I pointed out or that I mentioned. So that's all good. Again, cleaned up these harnesses and zip tied them. Everything's all nice and neat, a little bit better than it was before. And that's the name of the game. So just kind of sprucing things up. And otherwise, I'm probably not going to show too much of the reassembly. If I roll a little bit of film footage, well, great. If not, no big deal, because I really have to push and get through this thing. But I will demo the unit when I come back. I will at least film that. Okay, so here we are. Everything is ready to go. She's all powered up, lit up. I don't have the faceplate back on because I ended up gluing that little plastic threaded post over here that had busted loose at some point. It was still attached to the metal chassis here, and there's those screws in the back that I pointed out earlier that extend through and screw into these posts here. And this one was, you know, still attached to the face, you know, the chassis over here, so it had busted loose at some point, like I said. I got it glued back on, but the epoxy I used has a longer cure time, so that's what I'm waiting for, which is why the cover isn't back on. You know, the panel here and the cover on the top. I'm just leaving it as is. But if you tuned into the beginning of the video, you will see how it looked when it was, you know, all in one piece. But anyways, that doesn't really matter. I have a CD piped into the auxiliary inputs, some YouTube music, so I'm going to start with that and then switch over to the tuner, and that's about it. So let's go ahead and start her up. Get a little more volume. Okay, so there's that. Now let me go ahead and switch over to FM. I'm going to turn it down first because I don't know what's playing, and you know the whole copyright thing, so anyways. Okay, so there's that. Everything's working. You can see we have our stereo light, so multiplex is large and in charge, so yeah, everything's good as expected. So anyways, I'm going to get it back to its human. So thanks for tuning in. As I always say, guys, peace, love, music, and the vintage audio that brings it to your ears. Till next time, you all take care.
This has been a Spinning Head production.